I watched my sister take a bite of the chocolate tart, her lips curling into that smug smirk I had always hated. She didn't even glance at my son, who was quietly coloring at the corner of the table. Instead, her eyes flicked to me with that familiar mix of superiority and judgment. "Maybe if your son had two parents, he wouldn't be such a mess," she said, her voice light but sharp, cutting through the soft clatter of cutlery. The words hit me like a cold splash of water. I froze, holding my fork midair, unsure if I wanted to scream or cry. All around us, the restaurant buzzed with families, oblivious to the storm brewing at our table. My son's small hand trembled slightly as he shifted his crayons on the paper, glancing up at me with a fleeting frown, sensing the tension. I wanted to protect him, to shield him from her venom, but the sting of her words dug deep. I thought about the years I had spent raising him on my own, the nights I had stayed up sick, the countless moments I had sacrificed just to give him stability. And yet, here she was, sitting there with that easy grin, making it sound like everything was my fault. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, the old ache of helplessness resurfacing. She had always had this way of twisting situations, of making herself look perfect, while I felt like I was constantly failing. I told myself I wouldn't react, not in front of him, not in front of anyone. But every fiber of my being wanted to lash out, to remind her that life wasn't a simple dessert plate where she could sprinkle judgment and call it truth. Still, I stayed quiet, watching her take another bite, savoring the moment like a predator with prey. I noticed the subtle smirk she threw toward our mother, who didn't intervene, only raising an eyebrow before taking another sip of her coffee. That glance, approving and complicit, made the insult feel even heavier. I clenched my fists under the table, telling myself that this wasn't the end, that I wouldn't let her undermine me so easily. My mind started spinning with possibilities, quiet plans that I had never allowed myself to imagine before. The hurt was there, sharp and undeniable, but beneath it, a fire was lighting. I realized that this time I wouldn't stay silent. Something inside me shifted, a promise forming that whatever she thought she could get away with today, she would soon regret. After that afternoon at the restaurant, I didn't confront my sister immediately. I knew her type. If I yelled or cried, she would turn it around, make me look dramatic or petty, and relish the scene. So I stayed quiet, letting the words simmer in my chest like a dark ember I refused to snuff out. My son noticed my silence, of course. He asked later, in that small, curious voice of his, "Mom, why did Aunt say that about me?" I knelt beside him, smoothing his hair, forcing a smile I didn't feel. "She's just upset about things she can't control, sweetheart," I told him. "Don't pay attention." But I could see the confusion lingering in his eyes, the question that begged for an answer I couldn't yet give. In the days that followed, I started paying closer attention, not just to what she said, but to everything she did. I had always known she was manipulative, but until now, I hadn't seen the full scope. Every family gathering, every casual comment, every sly glance, she wove a pattern of superiority and deceit. I noticed how she subtly twisted my mother's perception of me, how she convinced our extended family that I was somehow fragile, incapable of handling life alone. And worse, I discovered that she had been undermining my parenting in ways I hadn't realized. Text messages she'd sent behind my back, telling relatives I was too strict or overwhelmed. Emails she'd forwarded to make it look like I was negligent. I watched quietly, collecting proof like a patient strategist. At first, it was small things. Overheard phone calls where she laughed about my struggles, private messages where she called my son a project she'd never have to deal with. Then came the bigger discoveries. She had been taking credit for things I had done, manipulating situations so it looked like I was the one causing drama, even going so far as to involve my mother in her schemes. Each revelation stoked the fire inside me, but I stayed calm, careful not to give her the satisfaction of seeing me rattled. The turning point came one evening when I was helping my son with his homework. He had been struggling with a project, and she had somehow convinced him that his mistakes were evidence of my incompetence. But that night, he looked up at me, exhausted and frustrated, and whispered, "Mom, why does she always make me feel like I'm wrong?" My heart broke, but it also solidified my resolve. I could no longer let her shape my son's perception of himself, nor could I allow her to continue eroding my credibility with the family. I started planning carefully. I documented everything: messages, screenshots, voice notes, everything that showed her manipulation and lies. I knew that confronting her directly without proof would be useless. She thrived on ambiguity, on twisting truth to suit her narrative. Instead, I built a strategy that would leave no room for argument. Every subtle insult, every slight, every attempt to undermine me was cataloged, ready to be revealed when the time was right. As I worked, I found an unexpected sense of empowerment. The quiet observation, the patient collection of evidence, it gave me clarity. I realized that I didn't need to stoop to her level or fight with venom. I just needed precision, timing, and a calm mind. The moment would come when I would act not out of anger, but out of justice for myself and for my son. By the time the next family gathering rolled around, I was ready. I knew exactly how to turn the tables, how to make sure that every sneer, every cruel comment, every undermining gesture she had made would be seen for what it truly was. The anticipation was almost intoxicating, not revenge for its own sake, but the satisfaction of reclaiming control, of showing my son and the family that deceit and manipulation would not go unchallenged. And so, I waited with the quiet patience of someone who had been wronged too many times to act hastily. I watched her, smiling in that self-assured way she always did, unaware that this time I held the power. Every glance she threw, every smirk she displayed, only fueled my resolve. When the moment came, it would be decisive, undeniable, and utterly unforgettable. The next family gathering arrived, and I walked in with calm confidence, my evidence tucked safely in my phone. She spotted me immediately, her smirk already forming, expecting the usual tension. But this time, I didn't flinch. I let her make the first move, subtly undermining me, as she always did, until I quietly projected the messages, screenshots, and voice notes for everyone to see. The room fell silent. My mother's eyes widened in shock, relatives whispered, and my sister froze, realizing the game had shifted. No words could twist the truth now. The proof was undeniable. Every insult, every sly comment, every manipulative act she had done was exposed, plain as day. Her smugness vanished, replaced with a flicker of panic and disbelief. I turned to my son, who was watching intently. He smiled, a light of relief in his eyes, and for the first time, I saw him feel safe and proud. He understood that his mother was not weak, that she would protect him, and that his worth was never in question. The tension that had hung over us for years lifted in an instant, replaced by quiet empowerment and justice. My sister slumped into silence, unable to recover her usual dominance. I didn't need to gloat. The room itself confirmed her defeat. For once, I felt completely seen and respected, and my son felt it too. The fire inside me cooled, leaving only calm satisfaction. That night, as we left, I held my son's hand tightly. The world had tried to shame us, but together, we had proven that truth and resilience could not be broken. And somewhere deep inside, I knew that this was the start of a new chapter, one where no one would ever belittle us again.